Listen and Live Audio presents How to Instantly Connect with Anyone. 46 all-new little tricks for big success in relationships. Written and read by Leo Lowndes.
Introduction. You and a professor of psychiatry walk into a laboratory and see two naked men sitting in straight-back chairs, wearing nothing but embarrassed smiles on their faces. The professor mercifully throws each a blanket while explaining your assignment for the day. These two gentlemen, he informs you, both work in a multinational corporation. One is the CEO. He has a loving family, faithful employees, and adoring friends. He has enough money to enjoy life, care for everyone he loves, and even donate generously to charity. The other, he continues, cleans floors at the company. He too is a good and honest man. However, this fellow has a string of failed relationships, few friends, and he has trouble making ends meet. You, my dear student, are to determine which is which. You look at the two men quizzically. There doesn't seem to be much difference between them. They look to be about the same age, of comparable weight, similar complexions, and, if it can be determined by looks, equal intelligence. Neither would make the cut for a Cosmo centerfold, but you would classify both as handsome. You respond. I'm sorry, I can't tell who has which job. The professor continues. What if I further told you that both men were born into families of the same socioeconomic status, grew up in the same neighborhood, played together as children, went to the same schools, and tested pretty closely on an IQ test? Now you are completely flummoxed. Have you ever been confused like that? You see two people who from all outward appearances are similar, yet one is successful, the other a failure. One has many friends and supporters, the other doesn't. One lives above that glass ceiling where only winners dwell, but the other looks up longingly, asking himself, why are they up there and I'm still struggling down here? The professor smiles, turns to his subjects and says, Thank you, gentlemen. You may go now. They are as thankful as you are that the experiment is over. Grasping their blankets tightly around themselves, they stand up. Subject number 1 turns to subject number 2 and says, I bet you're glad that's over, Joe. Good job. Then, walking out the door, he looks at you and says, Gentlemen, I know that must have been an uncomfortable experiment for both of you. I hope the next one is more pleasant. You must be doing very important research. But as subject number 2 starts to leave, he mumbles, Glad I could help you out. He then pauses for a moment at the door, looking expectant. The professor hands him some money. Subject number 2 quickly takes it and starts to put it in his pocket, until he realizes he doesn't have one. The professor closes the door and once again asks you the big question. So, my dear student, now do you know which is the CEO and which is the cleaner? Yes, now you do know. With a big smile, you confidently reply. The first is the CEO. Right, and how did you know? The professor asks. Well, you respond, the first fellow was concerned with the other man's feelings. The second guy, come to think of it, said, I am glad that I could help you out, putting the emphasis on himself. That made it sound like we owed him something. Exactly, the professor exclaims. You see, the first gentleman put himself in the other person's mindset, thus creating an instant connection with him. He predicted Joe's discomfort and complimented him to alleviate it. The second fellow referred only to himself. He had that you owe me attitude, encouraging me to pay him off. I did, and thus we have no further debt to him. Whereas subject number 1 identified with us. If he should contact us for something in the future, we would remember and welcome his call. But Professor, you hesitantly ask, why were they naked? He chuckles. The reason I stripped them of their clothes for this experiment was to shrink their comfort level, and thus see how each would react in a strange or new situation, as we must all do daily. The professor looks at you. Did you sense how much more confident the CEO was? That was because he wasn't thinking about himself. his mind was busy predicting how the other fellow felt being put in that painful position. Therefore, his own discomfort took a back seat. Do you remember his first words? He said, "Bet you're glad that's over, Joe. Good job." He sensed that at that moment Joe needed a self-esteem booster. He also thought about our emotions. He understood that conducting an experiment with two naked men was probably not a comfortable situation for us either. Do you remember what he said to us? You do. He forecast our sentiments and expressed trust in the significance of our research. He then wished us well. He expressed his awareness and predicted how we might feel about conducting the strange experiment. In contrast, the floor scrubber spoke only of himself. He expressed no perception of how we might feel. You can see how subject number 2's selfishness and lack of sensitivity could be a tiny pinprick. Let's call it a pain prick. That was the professor's only contact with Joe, and he had no others to offset it. Although subtle, it was sharp enough to deflate any desire that he might have to do things for Joe or to see him again. Throughout his life, this poor chap had probably let too many pain pricks pile up with people. No one promoted him from floor scrubber. What is this quality that enables people to connect instantly with others like the CEO did? I call it emotional prediction, or EP. He was able to predict how the professor, Joe, and you would feel right after the experiment, and he spoke accordingly, as though he were inside your head. At this point you may be asking how emotional prediction differs from emotional intelligence. Good question. The latter is the important concept popularized by Dan Goleman's excellent book of the same name. That involves recognizing one's own emotions, as well as those of other people, becoming motivated, and handling relationships. Emotional prediction is yet another layer of communicating. It is the ability to predict ahead of time what someone's immediate or distant emotions will be in relation to something you will say or will do. You can then choose your own behavior accordingly. Most of your choices should and will have the goal of enhancing the other person's self-esteem, helping people to feel good about themselves. The goal is similar to Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, but the method is different. We are not talking about giving compliments. Nowadays, some overt compliments are obvious and raise people's suspicions about your motives. To win people's respect and affection, you must dig deeper into their psyche and locate the size and shape of their very fragile self-esteem. Once accomplished, you can accurately predict their emotions, respond with sensitivity, and make them feel connected to you. You will find that many of the following techniques are to enhance your own confidence and prestige. Now, you might think this is incongruent with the goal of helping others feel good about themselves. It is not, for this reason. As much as people would like everyone to respect them, they long for acceptance from someone they look up to. The need for this type of appreciation from higher-ups starts early. Preschoolers want approval from their parents. Kids want the admiration of their teachers, and teens crave acceptance by the cool crowd. Even as adults, people still yearn for recognition from those that they respect. When people revere you, your deference in dealing with them gives their self-esteem a powerful boost. And as you become more sensitive to their sometimes suppressed emotions, their affection and esteem can turn into genuine love for you. The two of you are connected. Part 1. 9 little tricks to take the hell out of hello and put the good in goodbye. How to have a one-of-a-kind, noticeably outstanding handshake. No one disputes that people form a quick opinion of you the split second your image reaches their retina. I disagree, however, with the hackneyed adage, you never have a second chance to make a good first impression. Someone gets an intense second impression of you the moment your eyes lock and your bodies touch in a handshake. A weak handshake shouts instant disconnect. Will Lipton, the former CEO of a very successful company in Greenwich, Connecticut, told me he once faced the very tough choice of hiring one of two candidates who were equally qualified for a top position. When I asked him who got the job, he replied, "The one with a better handshake." Nowadays, most enlightened people know that they should not be knuckle crunchers, dead fish floppers, fingertip grabbers, pumpers, or kiss-my-ring shakers. So in the past few years, no one handshake really stood out as special, until last month. After a speech I had given for General Motors Canada, the president and managing director shook my hand. "Whoa, Mr. Elias," I thought, "that is one heck of a handshake." It was strong and friendly, and it created a connection that I hadn't felt since my Girl Scout secret handshake. I couldn't figure out why his had such tremendous power. I had highlighted the importance of handshakes in my speech, so I felt comfortable complimenting his. Artur Elias smiled. He turned his wrist over and pointed to the vein where the doctor takes your pulse. "Leo, it's all right here," he said. "Whenever I shake someone's hand, I lightly place my pointing finger on their pulse." In a sense, this is touching the shakee's heart, because a person's pulse is a wave of blood traveling directly from the heart. I was instantly converted, and now I am a shameless pulse presser. Recently, a Freemason told me that the group has 20 handshakes. The highest one, the lion's paw of the Master Mason, involves pressure on a brother's pulse, so it is obviously recognized as big-time stuff. When you get used to it, you will become sensitive to the connection your new handshake makes with your shakee. Little trick number 1. Press their pulse when shaking hands. Whenever shaking hands with someone, do not press like you are taking his pulse, but to create that instant connection with a new acquaintance, ever so lightly place your forefinger on his wrist vein, so he feels the warmth of your body flowing into his. Incidentally, sliding your hand into his far enough to reach his pulse forces your webs to touch. That's another sign of a great handshake. How to exchange business cards with class. At one of our monthly Chamber of Commerce meetings, the coordinator introduced me to Gakuto, the head of a Japanese business association. We chatted a bit, and then, as people promptly do at such gatherings, he handed me his business card. I glanced at it, thanked him, and put it in my purse. I then gave him mine. He gently took it, and holding it with both hands, gazed at it as though it were made of fragile Japanese rice paper. "Golly, Gakuto," I thought, "it's just a business card. You can put it away now." I must admit, though, I rather liked the attention he was giving it. The way he kept gazing at it made me feel important. In fact, when I broke the silence, it seemed to shatter his concentration. Gakuto pulled his eyes away from my card almost reluctantly, and we continued chatting. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed he was still holding my card with both hands. To me, it represented respect and continued curiosity about my work. I suddenly felt a closer connection to this man who had taken my card so seriously. He even glanced at it again once or twice while we were talking. Talk about making me feel special. The Japanese may not be touchy-feely with people, but they sure are with business cards. These polite people call it meishi. The word has the cachet of the ceremonial aspect of exchanging your business cards. I'm sure Gakuto wasn't thinking of his actions as a little trick. He was simply following the Asian tradition of treating someone's business card respectfully. Well, I figured you don't need to be Japanese to get away with holding someone's business card with respect with two hands, so I gave it a try. It created an almost tangible connection with the next few people that I met. Little trick number 2. Hold their business card while chatting. Don't just glance at a new acquaintance's business card and quickly stash it into your pocket or purse. First, hold it with both hands and gaze at it as though it were a small piece of art, hand-painted especially for you. Then you can switch to holding the card with one hand, but continue holding it at waist level or just below. To make her feel even more esteemed and valued, give it a respectful glance from time to time. How to be cool giving your business card. Just as the choreography of taking someone else's card is significant, demonstrate respect for your own when giving it to someone. You needn't ceremoniously bestow it, but neither should you shove it at the recipient like a worthless piece of cardboard stock. I've seen people exchange cards as though they were dirty Kleenexes. Keep your cards in an attractive card case and handle them carefully. Think of your business card as the Japanese do. You are giving someone a representation of yourself. It shows that you take pride in your profession. Little trick number 3. Present your card with pride. When giving your card, take it out of an attractive carrying case gently and present it horizontally with the script facing the recipient. Hold it just a bit higher than usual, not in his face, but at a height where he could almost read it in your hands. If you respect your work, others will too. After all, people who love the work they do and do the work they love are big winners in life. How to be a successful networking conversationalist. That same evening, I discovered another big bonus of holding someone's business card while conversing. It's also a boost for being a successful networking conversationalist. The coordinator introduced me to a gruff auto parts dealer. As is the custom at these meetings, I handed him my business card. He quickly eyeballed it and stuffed it into his back pocket, which of course would be a grave insult to an Asian. But practicing my new skill, I continued to hold Mr. Autopart's card respectfully, and I glanced at it occasionally. Understandably, my not knowing an air filter from a clutch constricted our conversation. And if I told him I was a motivational speaker, his first thought would have been the speakers in his car stereo. In other words, we were from different worlds. Unfortunately, fate and the coordinator had sentenced us to struggling with a few seconds of convivial conversation. But neither of us could think of anything to say. We just stood there looking at each other. To break the awkward moment, I tried my brand-new card trick. Once again, I looked at Mr. Autopart's business card, which I was still holding in my hands. Bingo! It was pure conversation inspiration. Under his company name, I saw a photo of a circle-shaped gizmo with 6 little thingamajiggies protruding from it. Interesting card, I fibbed. What's the picture? His deadpan expression suddenly dissolved. A big smile replaced it. "A distributor cap!" he exclaimed excitedly. Whew! I had inadvertently hit on a subject that he was passionate about. And what does a distributor cap do?" I asked. I know, it was pretty lame, but it got us through a couple of minutes of conversation until we could gracefully split and move on to more pertinent conversation with other people. Little trick number 4. Examine their business card for conversation inspiration. When talk lags, look at their card again, which of course you are still holding. It can rescue you from discussion deadlock. Even if his card doesn't have an interesting photo, you will likely find a conversational clue on the card. His logo, his title, or maybe the mission statement. Small business owners often design their own cards. There, staring right at you, is another opening for an interesting story, or one that they find interesting at least. If appropriate, you could comment on an unusual title on her card. During the past year, I have been able to resuscitate near-death conversation by asking, what exactly does a electroplater, or phrenologist, and, I kid you not, an erection coordinator do? My favorite card had Top Dog as the job title. How to give or avoid social hugs. We've talked about handshakes. Now let's move on to social hugs, an extremely controversial subject. Most of us have been hugged by people we loathe and left unhugged by people we love. At this very moment, serial huggers are attacking hug haters, while hug haters are hurting hug cravers by not hugging them. In short, to hug or not to hug has become something of a national dilemma. It's one that can turn otherwise genial greetings into a social disaster. I take no stand on the divisive hug issue, but offer instead some hugging hints. First, here is a self-defense move for hug haters. When someone approaches you with arms outstretched and a big, glowing jack-o'-lantern smile, it is obvious that you are the intended victim of a hugger. Short of faking a soggy sneeze, there are few defensive moves. You can try averting the impending embrace by thrusting your right hand out and dangling it in midair as though it were hungry for a shake. Unfortunately, this is an obvious hug evasion technique, which makes the hugger feel instantly disconnected from you. My advice, medical or significant psychological conditions aside, is to grin and bear it. To date, no one has ever died from a hug. Now, here is a note for happy huggers. Most likely you are a people person, and you sincerely enjoy bodily contact. You wish you were an octopus so you could hug 4 people at the same time. Many of your fellow embracers tell me a hug is a handshake from the heart. Unfortunately, not everyone agrees. So shall I swear off hugging, you ask? No, of course not, but let the other person adjudicate whether to be a shaker or a hugger. If she does not welcome your imminent display of affection, you can usually tell by her body language and, in extreme cases, terrified eyes. So here's the move. When you spot her, open your arms wide, but keep your elbows close to your waist. If your intended huggy welcomes your embrace, she will slide into your low-slung, welcoming arms. If not, she will grab your right hand, which is still open at waist level, and shake it, relieved that you are not one of those effusively invasive hugging types. Little trick number 5. Let them choose whether to hug or to shake. Huggers, please camouflage your hugging intentions by keeping your elbows almost touching your waist as you open your arms. That permits your potential huggee to make the call of whether to slide into your embrace or grab your right hand and give it a shake or two. Oh, and a final warning to both camps. Beware of giving or receiving promiscuous hugs too early. Once you have established that you have a hugging relationship, withholding the embrace in subsequent encounters could be confusing at best, cruel at worst. How to detect if someone's hug is fake. It is my obligation to alert you that some hugs carry heavy, negative emotional baggage. How can you tell? Ponder for a moment a sincere hug. That's the kind grandma gives her grandchildren, and long-lost friends share when reunited. Both loving spouses celebrating their anniversary and young people discovering the joy of love express their emotions with a sincere hug. There is, unfortunately, another kind of hug. I call it the "I really don't enjoy hugging you" hug. That's the kind colleagues at industry conventions who don't even remember each other's names annually impose on each other. It's the obligatory kind that people give distant relatives that they never knew they had at family reunions. And, of course, the kind you see cutthroat competing employees bestow upon each other at company Christmas parties. What is the difference between the first group of hugs and the second? The distance that the huggers stand from each other? Sometimes. The tightness of the squeeze? Usually. But here is where the rubber really hits the road in hugging sincerity. Uncomfortable huggers pat each other's backs. Say someone throws his arms around you, but a few seconds later his hands transmogrify into flippers on your back. This indicates that he is uncomfortable hugging you for one reason or another, and it mitigates the authenticity of the hug. His hand flapping discloses discomfort with your closeness. Do not always assume that back-patting is negative, though. Without knowing the particulars of a relationship, precise analysis is seldom possible. Here are a few situations, however, where people often employ the patter's hug. First, two gentlemen who wish to express friendship, but they want to make it quite clear to each other they are not physically enjoying the hug. How do they do it? They thump their hands on each other's backs. 2. Mutual back patting by two women also expresses discomfort with the closeness, but it doesn't convey the same fear of misunderstood sexual orientation. Finally, a man and a woman. Now it gets very complicated. 4 possibilities follow. 1. If the male and female like each other, but are not sexually attracted to each other, they immediately begin patting to convey their erotic disinterest. 2. If one of them would like to take the relationship further, but the other wouldn't, the person who starts patting is signaling lack of sexual attraction, while the disappointed other pats back to show that he or she supposedly doesn't care. 3. The two are sexually attracted to each other, but feel they shouldn't be enjoying the hug that much, so they release anxiety through mutual back patting. 4. Ex-lovers. When they run into each other, they usually start with a sincere hug. But when it dawns on them that the relationship is over, or that their new partners are watching, they start patting. Little trick number 6. Don't ever pat when you hug. Stay in the embrace as long or as short as the situation and the hugging partner warrant, but do not let your hands become flippers on her back, lest it subliminally signal that you want to disconnect. Now, don't go crazy analyzing it if your co-hugger starts patting your back. It commonly occurs when one of the huggers feels the embrace is lasting too long. He or she is simply signifying, "Okay, time's up, let's end this hugging thing." So whenever you feel hands patting your back, smile and smoothly curtail the hug. I hope the foregoing hasn't stripped the joy of hugging away from huggers, forced hug haters to grin and bear agonizing embraces, or made you suspicious of everyone who hugs you. All I mean to say is, be sensitive to the vast difference in people's reactions to hugs and act accordingly. Now I want to give you a safer one-size-fits-all embracing option. It is a subtle, non-offensive gesture that clearly says to an acquaintance, "I want to hug you, but perhaps it's not appropriate." How to show you like someone without being forward. One evening at a gathering, I was telling an elderly gentleman a tale that proves that cats don't have 9 lives. At least mine didn't. Sadly, Sedgwick fell out of a 6th-floor window. Now, most males might consider the narrative schmaltzy, but this gentleman's hand reached out to touch my arm in compassion. Halfway, however, it seemed he thought better of it. His arm stopped in midair, and he respectfully pulled it back, thus giving me the impression that his instinct was to touch me affectionately, but, in spite of his compassion for my deceased cat, his respect for me won out. Thus another little trick was conceived. Little trick number 7. Reach out as though you are going to touch someone, but stop in midair and return your arm to its original position. It is a subtle technique, and when executed innocently is lovely. You make the recipient feel you revere them, but you don't want to express your warmth in any untoward manner. Incidentally, it's a great technique for lovers, or those who want to be lovers. Men, use this move on a female friend who you would like to make more than a friend. She may appreciate your affection, but can't accuse you of being too forward. Needless to say, the only acceptable body parts for the no-contact caress are the arm, or, on rare occasions, the cheek. Women, it works wonderfully on men. Their fantasies go wild, wondering what it means. While we're on this subject, let me tell you there are times when you should touch, or at least not avoid it. For many centuries in India, people in the lowest class were called Dalits, or untouchables. The upper class wanted no physical contact with them whatsoever. Salespeople have told me that's how they feel when a customer flings money on the counter for them to scoop up. When paying for something, put the money directly in the salesperson's hand. That and concurrent eye contact silently says, "For this brief second, you and I are connecting." How to develop excellent eye contact in 8 easy steps. Now, we can't leave the subject of body language when talking to strangers without mentioning eye contact, the most obvious and sometimes most difficult way people express their connection to each other. Ever since Mommy yanked you out from hiding behind her skirts and told you to look people in the eyes, you've known how crucial it is in the Western world. Yet for many, the most difficult aspect of meeting people is looking into their eyes long enough to really connect with them. Why is this a challenge, even for some self-assured people? Because, like 2 tigers staring each other down in the jungle, intense eye contact ignites a primitive fight-or-flight instinct. If one of the tigers looks away, he could get pounced on. Weak eye contact is a handicap in the human jungle, too. So here is an 8-step physical therapy program to strengthen your eye contact. Number 1. Take note of the color of his eyes. It seems obvious, but we've often known people for years and can't accurately describe the color. In fact, right now, stop for a second and think of a few friends. Can you picture the precise color of their eyes? When talking with, say, a woman, describe the color of her eyes to yourself. Don't stop at blue or brown. There are sapphire pale and ice blue eyes. Brown eyes can be hazel, almond, or earthy. Gray eyes can range from light slate to dark storm cloud. Now, number 2. Check out the shape of her eyes. Are they round, oval, almond? How much of the whites of her eyes are showing? And how white are they? Are they a little bloodshot? Here is another crutch for the eye contact challenged. Number 3. Study how far apart her eyes are. Ask yourself, if she loaned me her binoculars, would I have to separate the eyepieces or bring them together? Number 4. Are her eyes symmetrical? Is one eye a little smaller or droopier than the other? Number 5. Another time, concentrate on the length of her eyelashes. Are they straight, curly? What color are they? Now here's an interesting observation to make. When you are with a small group, watch the person's eyes to determine whom he is looking at most. When extended eye contact is called for, such as when someone is speaking to a small group, number 6, count his blinks. A study reported in the Journal of Research and Personality called The Effects of Mutual Gaze on Feelings of Romantic Love proved that people who are directed to count each other's eye blinks during a conversation develop stronger romantic feelings for each other than the members of a control group who were given no eye contact directions. Here are a few more ways to train yourself to become more comfortable with maintaining excellent eye contact. Number 7. Try to determine if he is wearing contact lenses. And are the lenses colored or clear? Now, number 8 is for women only. Determine how much eye makeup another female is wearing. How much mascara, shadow, eyeliner. And stop laughing, gentlemen. We women do that naturally. If you practice these techniques, looking into someone's eyes will gradually become natural and less daunting without depending on these crutches. To recap, here is little trick number 8. Examine 8 characteristics of their eyes. To boost your eye contact with people, alternate between defining the color, shape, and whites of their eyes. Check out the length and color of their lashes. Are they wearing contact lenses or glasses? How far apart are their eyes? Count their blinks. Ladies, check out another woman's eye makeup. Is she wearing false eyelashes? Meow. After a few rounds of doing this exercise, looking into people's eyes will be a breeze. Strong eye contact will become second nature. Incidentally, this eye contact technique is especially effective when you are listening to someone talking to a group. Your intense eye contact coming out of the small crowd makes a big impression on the speaker. Oh, and in case I forgot, when you're speaking one-on-one with someone, don't forget to pay attention to what she is saying, too. How to meet the people you want to meet. I must log this following little trick under a heading called The Ignored Obvious. You would think everyone would do it every time they attended a meeting, a seminar, or any event that has a group of seated people. Yet in all my years of speaking for groups, I have seldom noticed anyone consciously performing little trick number 9. The usual pattern is this. The first person to arrive at the seminar or seated gathering sits in the right rear of the room. The next arrival sits in the left front. The next the left rear, and so on. Each person sits as far from the other participants as possible until all the seats are filled. Then, during the break in single seminars, I often notice a male audience member eyeing a female across the room, or vice versa. Now, unless one of them is blessed with that rare quality called complete confidence, they are never going to meet. But if only one had chosen a chair next to the other, sparks could have ignited. Ditto in corporate programs. Employees must know the advantage of sitting next to a VIP, let's call him a big cat in their own company, or at conventions somebody in the industry who could be important to them. But what surprises me is that I never see a participant walk in 10 minutes early and wait by the wall to see where other people are sitting before choosing their chair. So here's the plan. Be among the first to arrive at a large industry, company, or social presentation. However, do not choose your seat yet. Stand at the side of the room and eyeball everyone who comes in. When you spot your target person, pretend the music just stopped in a game of musical chairs. Then sprint right to the seat next to Mr. or Ms. Opportunity. Little trick number 9. Hover around to see where someone you want to meet sits first. If you are seeking any important alliance, romantic, social, business, arrive early at the gathering and hover around the sides like a helicopter. Then, when you spot that important someone, make a speedy landing in the seat right next to him or her. Remember, where you deposit your bottom can change your bottom line. Part 2. 10 little tricks to develop an extraordinary gift of gab. How to make people appreciate your introduction. No two people hearing the same words at the same time from the same person ever get the same sense of what someone said. Every sound that comes out of a speaker's mouth strikes a minefield of each listener's buried memories, associations, and a lifetime of emotional pleasure or pain from everybody they've ever met. Even the order of words in a single sentence can affect how someone feels about the person who is talking. For example, I've often heard a man introduce his wife. "I'd like you to meet my wife, Wilma." Or a wife say, "This is my husband, Harold." Now, most people would ask, what's wrong with that? Can you guess? It will be obvious after I tell you about a big-headed former boss I once had. Whenever this man introduced me, he would arrogantly announce, "This is my assistant, Leo." Once it was, "This is my assistant, Leo." The facts were correct. I was indeed his assistant. What stung was the order of his words. He said it as though his first 4 words were the only essential ones, and the last word, my name, was optional. Would it have hurt his self-image to think of me as a human being whom he employed as his assistant, rather than any featherless biped who could fill that role? I wished he'd dismount his high horse just once to predict how the way he worded his sentence made me feel demeaned and disconnected from him. People would have a different impression of both of us if he had said, "This is Leo, my assistant," putting my name first. I know you're thinking, "Whoa, back up, Leo, you're being way too sensitive." My answer is that everybody is super sensitive when it comes to themselves. I'm sure old Mr. Bighead didn't mean to demean me. He just didn't have the emotional prediction that the CEO in the introduction had. That CEO would have surely said, "Meet Leo, comma, pause, my assistant," putting my name before my position. When you are introducing someone, don't say, "Meet my boyfriend, Harold." Say, "Meet Harold, my boyfriend." Don't say, "I'd like to introduce you to my wife, Wilma." Replace the subconscious pain prick with the pleasure pat of hearing, "Wilma, comma, my wife." If it's not something simple like my wife, stop after saying her name. Then start a new sentence heralding her relationship to you. I dreamed of hearing Mr. Pompous say, "I'd like to introduce you to Lil. She is my assistant who's been working for me for 3 months." And of course I wouldn't have minded if he insisted on adding, "And I really like working with her." That comment would have made people like him more. Shakespeare told us, "All the world loves a lover." He forgot to add, "All the world likes a liker." Little trick number 10. When introducing someone, say their name before their role in your life. It's subtle, it's subliminal, it takes superior sensitivity, but it's worth it. Your prediction of other people's, even subconscious feelings make them feel good, not only about themselves, but about you. They probably wouldn't even be aware of whether their name came before or after their position. They'll just know they feel better when they're around you. How to get lively conversation going with people you've just met. People with the gift of gab have that Midas touch of being able to say howdy to strangers and chit-chat with anyone. Their most noticeable quality is how quickly they connect with the dozens of people we all encounter daily. Sales clerk, ticket agents, taxi drivers, telephone operators, fellow elevator passengers, and a whole world of others. Long, animated conversations with people they have just met seem effortless to them. When you also are adept at turning these strangers into acquaintances, and those you fancy into friends, you will know you are a graduate in the gift of gab. But, you ask, what shall I talk about with these strangers? Well, psychiatrists have an annoying habit of always answering a question with another question. So I'm giving myself a promotion now, and Dr. Lowndes will do the same. My answer to your question is this question: what is everyone's favorite subject? Right, it's themselves, but you already knew that. But if you don't know them, you can't just say, "Hi, tell me about yourself." However, let me tell you how one stranger got me talking about myself in spite of the miserable mood I was in. In 1 hour, this woman transformed me from a stranger to a friend. I'll always be grateful to my long-distance pal Cheryl Mostrom for inspiring this next little trick, which you can use with anyone you meet, anytime, anywhere. She turned a grumpy stranger, me, into a gabber. One icy February day 5 years ago, I had a pre-dawn flight from New York to Phoenix for a speech. At 4 a.m., when my alarm went off, I contemplated hurling it out the bedroom window. But lest it rub out some passerby, I decided against it. There was no time for breakfast at the airport, and these days an airline meal is an oxymoron. My seatmates were a howling infant and his mom, so sleeping was not an option. As I watched the flight attendant pass out one puny packet of peanuts per passenger, I considered filching the jar of pureed apricot from the kid's baby bag. Then, changing planes at Midway Airport, I raced to the connection gate a good half a mile away, just in time to sit on the plane for an hour while they de-iced the wings. After a bumpy takeoff, the flight attendant passed out barf bags instead of peanuts. The arrival. As often happens, the event coordinator, whom I hadn't yet met, picked me up at the airport. Now, meeting planners usually ask the obligatory, "How was your flight?" before moving on to grill me on every aspect of the program that I've planned for them. But this time Cheryl, from the law firm of Fenimore Craig, who up until then was just a slight phone acquaintance, said, "You must have gotten up terribly early this morning. What time did your alarm go off?" She then inquired whether I'd had time to eat at the airport, or if they'd served anything to me on the plane. On our walk to the car, she asked questions like, "Were the gates close together in Chicago where you changed planes? Was there much turbulence? Were you able to sleep on the plane?" It was as though Cheryl had been filming me since the moment I staggered into my pre-dawn shower. Had she seen me racing through the airport corridor at breakneck speed? Did she feel me itching to hurl my shoes at the security man who made me take them off? I was flabbergasted at her sensitive queries because she only knew 3 facts. 1, I took an early flight. 2, I had to change planes in snowy Chicago. And 3, the flight was an hour late. From those few clues, Cheryl envisioned what I'd gone through and realized I would want to get it off my chest. She demonstrated emotional prediction at its finest, and I felt an instant bond with her. If Cheryl hadn't asked those on-target questions as she drove me to the hotel, I would have still been silently grousing about my miserable trip. Instead, by the time we got there, we were both laughing about my flight from hell. I would have performed my entire speech in the car for her if it would have set her heart at rest. After I got to know Cheryl better, I complimented her on her insight about my experiences before I arrived. She said, "Leal, it's the same thing you did when you sent me your pre-programmed questionnaire." Now, a pre-programmed questionnaire is a list of questions speakers send to clients so they can get to know the organization better before speaking for them. One of the crucial queries on the questionnaire is, what has the participant's day been like up until the speech? I haven't seen Cheryl, who lives 2,000 miles away, after that day we met 5 years ago, but we have remained phone and email friends ever since. This little trick is based on an irrefutable phenomenon in nature. Anything up close looks larger than when it is at a distance. This is true for experiences as well as objects. For example, I didn't feel Cheryl's questions about my alarm clock or the proximity of the airport gates was small talk. Not at all. These hassles were still a big deal to me. I enjoyed getting them off my chest. So here is the technique to get interesting conversation started. Well, at least interesting to the other person. When you first meet someone, you know next to nothing about them. However, with very little effort, you can find out some trivial facts about his day. It can be as simple as asking someone at a party where he lives. If he lives at a distance, ask about his long drive. Ask questions like, was there much traffic? Were you driving on a highway or country roads? What is the speed limit on those roads? It may sound silly to you, but this is not small talk to him. Why? Because these details are still on his mental windshield. The proximity makes them loom larger in his mind than they really are. Inquiring about the traffic and speed limit the next day would seem trifling, even weird. But at this moment, it is relevant conversation for him. Questions about someone's last few hours just kickstart the conversation. Soon the natural flow takes over, and one subject leads to another. So take any seed of information you've gleaned. If you plant it and nurture it, you will be amazed at how quickly it turns into an animated discussion. The technique works wonderfully with friends, too. Let's say it's Wednesday. Your friend knows what time she woke up. She knows what challenges she faced at work, where she had lunch, what she ate and with whom, and lots of other forgettable stuff. To you, or any of her other friends, these facts are diddly-squat. However, they played a significant role in her Wednesday. That evening, she will love talking about them. By Thursday, she's forgotten Wednesday's details, so asking about them would sound pandering and foolish. For good conversation, catch someone's trivia while it's hot. The upcoming little trick 11 isn't just for creating good conversation, though. Since close friends are the only ones who talk about trivia with each other, chatting about your new acquaintances' minutiae gives the cachet of already being closely connected. Soon after I discovered how well this little trick works on acquaintances and friends, I decided to see if it also works on people you see all the time, like a family member or someone you live with. Now, the high price of real estate in New York City necessitates some unusual living arrangements. So I have a male friend, Phil Perry, as a roommate. I call him my platonic male roommate. He says we're friends without benefits. It's the same thing. Now, Phil likes to take long, leisurely walks through the city on Sunday mornings. When he returned from one of his walks, I asked him dozens of tiny details, anything I could think of. Phil, how was the temperature? Did you see many people on the street, or was it deserted? Were there any stores open? Did you stop for breakfast? Where? What did you eat? Phil didn't find my queries strange. He loved talking about his just-completed stroll, so much that I had trouble changing the subject. So here it is, little trick number 11. Ask people about their last few hours. To get a new acquaintance or an old friend talking, ask about her day, preferably the last 5 or 6 hours. Visualize as many details as you can think of and ask about them. As far-fetched as it seems to you, she's loving it because she is so close to the experience. But remember, each particular question has a short shelf life, so use it while it's hot. The formula is simple, and the conversational payoff is huge. How to start a friendship with complete strangers. Naturally, if you have time to spend with someone after being introduced, you can more easily lay the foundation for a friendship. In today's fast-paced world, however, that's a tough task. Say you have a quick conversation with a receptionist at an organization you're visiting, and you'd like to get to know her better. Or you meet a man at a gathering who works in tech support at a nearby company. But your time to make a connection is short. Turning your brief acquaintance into a friend is a challenge. However, if you plan it well, the following technique accomplishes just that. Soon after saying hello, bring up a subject, any subject, that you could logically follow up with another question. For instance, ask for nearby restaurant recommendations, driving directions, where to buy something. Ask her what movies she suggests. Get his advice on which home computer you should buy. Think of something that you might just need more information on later. Asking for recommendations is good for 2 reasons. The next day, you could pretend to have, quote, forgotten what movie she suggested and just have to call her again. If you have Mr. Tech Support's number, it is perfectly reasonable to contact him again. You can ask for suggestions on where you should buy the computer. Find a logical reason to contact the previous stranger a 3rd time. After seeing the movie or buying the computer, call to say thank you for the excellent advice. In the case of the receptionist nearby, you could even stop in to thank her in person. The secret is setting up those follow-up contacts during the first conversation. They promote you from stranger to acquaintance, and that is the first step to becoming a friend. Now, the next step. If you would like to orchestrate a friendship where you do things together, use the 2nd or 3rd conversation to get your new acquaintance talking about his or her interests. Then find a related situation that could involve an invitation. Does he like theater, Indian food, horror movies? After several short phone conversations, your invitation to an event in that genre seems very logical. The receptionist told you she likes movies? There's your opportunity when a new one opens. The techie who recommended your computer would be pleased if you just happened to have 2 tickets to the Technology Expo when it comes to town. Incidentally, I am not concentrating on dating here. A myriad of other factors, which I thoroughly cover in my program, How to Make Anyone Fall in Love with You, are involved in creating that special kind of relationship. We are primarily talking about friendship here. Little trick number 12. Set it up to make a second contact. Get your acquaintance talking about a subject that has a logical follow-up question. Then contact her again for further information. As long as it relates to what you talked about, there is nothing strange about getting in touch a 2nd time, or a 3rd. Now you are on the path to friendship. Another fun little trick for going from stranger to acquaintance. Noah Webster, the dictionary guy, never came across a common word that practically every 21st century person knows, at least those in the northeastern United States. It traces its roots to a Germanic language that developed in the 10th century. Are you curious? Drum roll, please. The word is shtick. Shtick is defined as a, quote, contrived bit of business often used by performers. Now, I'm not talking about your Uncle Charlie's shtick of spinning a plate on his finger or pulling a quarter out of your ear. I'm referring to a more subtle, spoken shtick that has the power to make people smile, to lift their day, and to feel an instant connection with you. Many people we see daily are in service professions, such as the cashier at your favorite coffee shop or the counter person at Taco Bell. Employees serving the public often plow through their day feeling anonymous and nameless. Here's how to brighten their day and practice your gift of gab at the same time. Give people a shtick name. Now, a shtick name is similar to a nickname, but you create it from a pleasant experience you've had with that person, or it can just be a flattering nickname. Let's say you happen to know that the Italian word for beautiful is bella. Now, the cashier at your regular coffee shop is Italian-American. You could get her day off to a great start hearing your cheerful "Ciao, Bella," which means "Hello, beautiful," in the morning. Let's say that at Taco Bell, you always order a half-pound beef and bean burrito with cheesy Fiesta potatoes. One time, the guy at the counter started preparing this delicacy the minute he saw you. Your shtick can be calling him Kreskin, the famous mind reader. I have a shtick name for the receptionist at my doctor's office. I once had a sharp pain in my neck, a real one, not the kind some people give us. I called my doctor's office and asked to speak to Dr. Carter. Camille Mazzotti, the receptionist, answered. As I was describing the pain, she asked me very astute medical questions. Then she said, "Of course, Leal, the doctor can call you back. However, she's with a patient now, and I know what she might suggest. May I tell you?" "Sure, Camille," I said. I followed her advice, and the soreness disappeared. So what is the shtick we both have fun with? Every time I speak to her, I call her Dr. Camille. I know she enjoys the professional promotion, and I enjoy making her smile. Now, there's a what's in it for me factor. As with most of the little tricks in this program that enhance people's self-esteem, there is something nice in this one for you, too. Let's go back to the coffee shop. Whoops, you left your wallet at home today? Bella is not going to insist you pay for it now, or maybe ever. Darn, at Taco Bell there is an unusually long line. Well, Kreskin might just work his magic. He will place your order the minute you walk in the door. Incidentally, Dr. Camille always finds a way to fit me into my doctor's very fully booked schedule. What about your friends? It's not just the English who go bonkers over titles. Everybody loves having one. Does your friend Patrick teach you things? Call him Professor Patrick. Does your friend Stephanie do good things for people? She is Saint Stephanie. Depending on his qualities, your buddy John can be Sir John, Father John, Prince John, Master John, or Captain John. Your friend Linda can be Lady Linda, Lieutenant Linda, Sister Linda, or even Princess Linda. Their honorable titles are only limited by your imagination and by the qualities your friends would love to have recognized. Little trick number 13. Give people a shtick name. If you think someone will enjoy it, give him a flattering nickname. It makes you memorable, and at very least it gives you both a smile. There is one fundamental shtick rule, however. It must augment the recipient's self-esteem. How to make friends with those who don't speak your native language. One of my short-term roommates, until she found her own apartment, was Sandy Fiorentino. She had come to New York to pursue a career in modeling. At 5'10", with natural platinum blonde hair that most models would die for, the prestigious Ford agency scooped her up. Sandy was ecstatic, because her first shoot was on the Italian Riviera. She could practice the language she'd been struggling for years to learn from her Italian grandmother. When she returned from her trip, she breathlessly told me all about it. Naturally, I asked the same question that every unmarried female asks another. Did you meet anybody interesting? Now, Sandy could have met the 10 most fascinating women in Italy, but as every female knows, anybody interesting translates into any interesting men. Sandy smiled coyly. Giancarlo, he is super cool, awesome. How did you meet him, Sandy? She giggled. He picked me up on the beach. Wow, Sandy, he must have been really hot. Well, no, she said, a lot of other guys tried, but I couldn't understand a word they said. But for some reason I understood Giancarlo perfectly, and we wound up dating every night. When he comes to visit me, I'll introduce you. Well, the hot Italian did come to New York, and when I met Giancarlo, I mentioned that Sandy told me he was the first man she understood speaking Italian. He winked at me and said very, very slowly, Parlo molto lentamente per gli stranieri. Even with my abysmally fractured Italian, I understood what he was saying. I speak very slowly to foreigners. Go, Giancarlo! The fast movers on the beach didn't get the gorgeous girl. The slow speaker did. He understood how people feel when they don't understand a language that they're trying to learn. Little trick number 14. Speak slowly for non-native speakers. In our increasingly global society, you will meet more and more people for whom English is a second language. For them to understand you, you must slow your speech down, way down. Of course it will sound strange to you, but I promise it won't to your listener. To connect with non-native people, you need to learn a new, very simple language. It's called really, really, really slowly spoken English. How to tailor your talk to your listeners. I once spoke at a conference in a less advantaged section of Mississippi with a prominent African-American speaker, Diana Parks. She is a dynamic woman who is beautifully spoken, so during her presentation, I couldn't believe my ears when I heard her say things like, "He don't know," and "they done it." After our speeches, I tentatively broached the subject with her. She just laughed and said, "Lil, I grew up here. These are my people. They relate to me better that way." I guess she was right. My speech had bombed, and Diana received a standing ovation. It wouldn't have been appropriate, of course, for me to try to speak like Diana. In retrospect, however, I realize I should have edited my talk somewhat to avoid using any unusual words. It was so obvious, after the fact. When in Rome, speak like the Romans. I felt ashamed of not having predicted the emotions of audience members who didn't understand some of my so-called big words. Sometimes you should leave your big words in the dictionary. If you're a 5-syllable kind of guy, cut your words to fewer than 3 syllables in certain crowds. You will make your listeners a lot more comfortable. For example, if you're having a fight with an average Joe, and you tell him not to prevaricate because his argument is specious, you'll get a blank stare, maybe a punch in the gut. Translate this into his language. Tell him, "Don't try to pull that on me. I know what you're saying is BS." It's similar to what you would do speaking with a child. If you are talking about, say, cartoons, you wouldn't ask, "Do you like the anthropomorphic ones?" You'd get a blank stare, maybe tears. Instead, ask, "Do you like the cartoons where animals talk and act like people?" A study published in the Journal of Psychonomic Science showed that if you are, quote, above someone else, in this case linguistic ability, anything you do that brings you down to his level makes him feel closer to you. Little trick number 15. Match your words to their educational level. Diversity isn't just race, color, and creed. It's linguistic, too, even though it's all the same language. If you want to really connect with people, tailor your vocabulary to your listeners, whether it's one person or 1,000. How to talk to less advantaged people. On the average, people make 3 aborted takeoffs on a career before getting off the ground and reaching a cruising speed with one they like. Single-handedly, I probably jacked up the average from 3 attempts to 12. One of my ditched efforts was as a travel writer. I had fantasies of mountain trekking in Thailand or lying on the beach in Belize, all for free. After querying many publications, I finally received a response from a supermarket tabloid. It didn't matter to me that it wasn't a literary publication. I didn't care that my stories would be sandwiched between recipes for squash soup and how to survive Saturday at the mall with the kids. I had a travel assignment. The editor sent me a contract and a list of destinations I could explore on their dime. I anxiously tore open the envelope. The choices were Atlantic City, Disneyland, Niagara Falls, the Grand Canyon, Yellowstone National Park. You've got to be kidding. Where is the Mayan Riviera, Bali, Pango Pango, the places I'd read about in Town and Country, Atlantic Monthly, and Destinations magazines? I raced to the phone and asked my editor if there were any other, more, unusual spots. She said, "Leal, we have to stay within the parameters of the possible with our readers. Most of them couldn't afford to go to the Caribbean, let alone any more exotic destinations." Roar of thunder, flash of lightning, I got it! She was so right. I had shown an abysmal lack of emotional prediction. I still eat my heart out when I finger through those upscale magazines in my dentist's office, and I see exotic vacation spots I could never afford. Well, apparently my dentist can. I suddenly had more respect for that supermarket tabloid. And just as editors understand the lifestyle of their readers, we should understand the lifestyle of whomever we're talking with. Little Trick 16. Don't speak of your haves with the have-nots. Never talk about a luxury that would be unobtainable for the person you are communicating with. Whether it's a vacation spot, a second home, expensive restaurant, or a housekeeper, predict their emotions when they hear about something in your fortunate life that probably will never be part of theirs. Many necessities of life to the middle class are unheard-of luxuries to those in less privileged circumstances. Why remind them? Why distance yourself further? Keep your differences a secret and celebrate your similarities. Giancarlo, Diana, and my magazine editor had EP. They perceived how badly someone would feel not speaking the language they were trying to learn, having limited vocabulary, or living on less money. Now, here's how an anonymous mom's EP saved me from a different kind of distress, total humiliation. How to save someone from dying of embarrassment. I want to hug all the people who have saved me from self-recrimination, hundreds of them. My most recent salvation was several months ago on a train. I was trying to sleep, but I heard a kid behind me making a ruckus with a video game. Rather than just asking the mother to confiscate it, I figured I should make friends with a little loudmouth first, and then make my request. I turned around. The noisy kid with the shoulder-length brown hair had her nose buried in the game. "Hi," I said. "What game are you playing?" "Tomb Raider," she mumbled almost inaudibly without looking up. I pictured ghouls ransacking graves. Gee, that's nice," I lied. "Do all the girls in school play these games?" She looked at me as though I were from a different planet. Then she looked at her mother and dove back into the game. I asked her mother, "What's her name?" Ignoring my question, the mother smiled and jumped in with, "Yes, practically all of the kids have PlayStations. It seems like they're addicted to them." Then she added apologetically, "They are quite noisy, though. We'll turn it off for a while." Mission accomplished. Smiling, I turned around to sweet slumber. When I awoke, I got up to go to the restroom. As I was about to enter the bathroom, a boy wearing a baseball cap with Robert written on it came out. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said in an unmistakably male voice. On the way back, I passed the noisy kid's seat. Sitting in it was the same brown-haired kid wearing a Robert cap. Her daughter was a son, I realized. I snuck back into my seat humiliated. In retrospect, I realized that Robert's mother had that priceless gift, emotional prediction. After I had mistakenly said all the girls, and what's her name, she didn't reveal her kid's true gender by saying Robert. She knew how embarrassed I'd be, and covered my obviously flawed question by quickly telling me about the popularity of the games. I wanted to hug her. We've all laid an occasional egg, mispronounced a word, called someone by the wrong name, obviously displayed our misunderstanding or ignorance, said something totally inappropriate, or just plain dumb. When someone is guilty of that, you will see by his agonizing expression that he wants to die. You feel terrible for him, but mercy killings are illegal. The following may not be the most delicate analogy, but it is right on target. If you have ever passed gas when you were chatting with a group of people, you know that 1 second silence can seem like an hour. Project how the mortified person who passed verbal gas feels. make a rapid comment to cover his humiliation. Little trick number 17. Conceal their verbal blooper with an instantaneous comment. If the speaker says something that she may soon realize is mistaken, mispronounced, or just plain dumb, quickly jump in and cover it. Say something distracting rapidly so there is little time for it to dawn upon her that she has been a dimwit. Speaking of changing the subject, here is how to smoothly change the subject. How many times have you been stuck in a conversation in which people are talking about something you know nothing about, care nothing about, or find just plain boring? But you can't jump into a new topic just out of the blue. It would sound weird. So how do you change the subject to something more interesting without sounding strange? First, let's explore the logical progression of conversation. Practically everything anyone says comes from free associating with something that the last person just said. Here's the pattern. 1. You make a comment that obviously relates to what person X just said. Number 2. After that, person X, or Y, picks up on a point related to what you just said. 3. You do the same again, and on it goes. It doesn't sound weird because your listeners understand the connection between the two thoughts. The pattern continues whether you are a group of 2 or 20. In this way, one subject gradually and logically flows into another. But that's too slow for you. You want them to get off the current topic and change the subject now. Here's how to do it. If you want to discuss a specific subject, pick up on something, a thought, a phrase, or even just a single word that the last speaker said. Now repeat or rephrase it, and then relate it to what you want to say. If you invoke their thought and then link it, even loosely, to yours, the connection makes sense to the listeners. For example, do you want to talk about a recent movie you just saw, or your new horseback riding lessons? Or maybe you want to tell the group about the great renovations you're doing to your house. But darn, they're talking about the most tedious subject in the world, the weather. Let's say some wearisome woman complains about the downpour last Saturday. Another person adds, "It's dreadful, it's raining every weekend." Now your challenge is to go from snore, the rain, to the movie you enjoyed. Here is how. In your first sentence, allude to rain. In your next, connect it to your desired topic. For example, say, "On rainy weekends, I usually go to a movie. In fact, just last week I saw one called," and so forth. The transition sounds smooth to people because you mentioned rain and then said something related to it. If you prefer to talk about your horseback riding, say, "I sure hope it doesn't rain next Saturday because I have my second horseback riding lesson." You want them to know about your home renovations? Say, "I'm praying it does rain next weekend because instead of taking the missus shopping, I'll have an excuse to stay home and keep on working on my new recreation room." You see, each time you only had to say the word rain to logically link it to whatever subject you wanted to talk about. Changing the subject is a time-honored trick for politicians. Listen to any Sunday morning political TV talk show and count the number of times they pull it off.